Hey guys, it's Omar Spahi here for another episode of the Dreamer Calmer podcast, and today I'm with none other than Brian Haberlin.
Hey guys.
Thank you for coming on the show. We have you have so many amazing credentials as just like the co-creator of Witchblade for Top Cow. You've been editor-in-chief for McFarlane Productions,
Yep.
And you've done a million creator-owned series as well.
Yep. I love comics. It's my problem.
Yeah, me too. I love it. This is so cool. Well, how did you get into comics? What was your first way into comics, as a fan?
Well, as a fan, I was always the kid that would draw, right?
Okay.
You know, and in high school, I had friends that were already way into comics, and I wasn't into comics yet. Okay, but they cherry picked the best of the best. So the 15-year-old me got okay, they would bring out these okay, this is Jim Starlin, Adam Warlock. This is Jim Starlin. This is the Thanos saga. Way back then.
Oh, yeah.
Kind of thing. This was at the time John Byrne was doing his X-Men run with Chris Claremont.
Yep.
And
the Dark Phoenix stuff.
And everything that they gave me, here's Gil Kane, here's Joan Buscema, here's, going even more esoteric, here's Byron Talbot's stuff, here's all this, more advanced stuff, and I still remember them saying, all right, okay, give me what else you got, what you got next, it's well, there's this one called Daredevil, and I'm like, Daredevil? Okay, what's that about? It's well, he's a blind lawyer by day, fights crime at night, and I'm thinking, really? Yeah, that's going to be good? And it was Frank Miller's.
Yeah, of course.
So it was just okay, give me more. So I was hooked, and then I would be going down to San Diego with portfolio in hand, and stuff. And I actually got a job offer from then editor-in-chief Jim Shooter and John Romita Sr. to go and pencil at Marvel when I was 18. And at the time, it was $35 a page you get paid. You had to move to New York.
Wow.
And instead, I went to film school out here. So
that's crazy. You got offered a job right at 18 just from showing pages? Or what was
pages.
What did you do? You just show up there with here's some stuff?
It was the old San Diego Convention Center, as I recall, where it used to be.
Wow.
San Diego Comic-Con. And, stand in line with the stuff and there you go.
And he's like, all right, come on, we're moving to New York. And
but again, it wasn't okay, you got X-Men now, and da-da-da. So it was we'll get you work, we're not promising anything, and stuff. That'd be a big, so I went to film school instead.
So you went to film school, but you did screenwriting there? Or what else did you,
I have a master's degree in screenwriting from Loyola Marymount.
Oh, wow. So that's how you became, and
then I worked in television. So,
what did you work in television?
So I started at Lorimar Television in comedy and drama series development. And then we went over to current programs where I worked on everything from Family Matters to Not Landings to Lois and Clark to dozens and dozens of shows. So we were the number one provider of part-time programming for years and years and years. But I still always wanted to do, I still did illustration always on the side. And I was always perfecting, trying to do new computer techniques, from the Amiga days to all this other kind of stuff. And finally, I still remember there was actually one of the people, very few people know this. When I was working for one executive, he was writing the recommendations for McFarlane to get to come into the country to get citizenship.
Oh wow!
Right,
you gave him the recommendation.
I had to work on one of those letters. But anyway, but I had back then when I was still working there, I had so I got to meet Terry Fitzgerald, who was Todd's right-hand man back in the time. And the guy I was working for, Brian really wants to get into comics. I'll give him a piece, and they gave me this Spawn, Jim Lee, Todd McFarlane, Angela piece that Jim Lee and Todd did. It's here you go, get into color. And I colored it and rendered it, and I put 3D models in the background and replaced some of the drawings they did with 3D model versions of the thing and gave it to them. I'm thinking, okay, this is going to be great. They're going to like this, right? And stuff. And Terry was like, Todd wants to know if you can put back in his line art.
That's funny.
And that really didn't amount to anything until, and I still go down to San Diego, portfolio in hand and not get dick. And then in '93, a friend of mine, Rod Underhill, said, hey, listen, I'm going to get a booth in a small press area in San Diego. Why don't you join me? I was like, okay. So I went down there and I had a CR2 or CR10, CR model CRT. God, what did I forget how to say those now? Those old big. So it was basically essentially deeper than it was wide, right? You know, and I had this big inkjet print behind me of Green Lantern with a 3D modeled power battery behind him, you know, and all,
of course,
whole 9 yards. And I had an animated Spawn on the monitor going down, and everybody and their mother came by and offered me work.
Oh wow. So you just made a big show of yourself and kind of just go like, you know, essentially like a peacock just showing its feathers.
So it worked out much better than going around with a portfolio in my hand.
That's the way.
And that's when Mark came by, and Mark
Silvestri?
Yeah.
And he came by and offered you work. What did he offer you work as a writer, an artist?
Well, so that was always my problem, because I would give, whenever I had the stuff, it'd be pencil, ink, and color and everything. It's like, and back then, especially, okay, what do you want to do? You know, and Mark needed somebody to start his computer coloring department, so I just figured, okay, that's the end, right? So that's what.
So you started off coloring.
Yeah,
that's cool. How did you first hear about Image Comics? Like, what would you know about them? Kind of.
I knew very little about them. It was like, you know how it is. It's like most people, I think they're into comics in their teens. They go to college or whatever and kind of get out of it for a while, and then come back into it again, right? The time when Jim and Rob and Mark and Todd were big at Marvel was the time I was out of comics.
So you would just...
I didn't even know who Mark Silvestri was when he came by and offered me the work. You know,
you're like, sure. I'm always into meeting.
Yeah, I mean, but I knew that Image was, you know, the thing that was on the rise and all that kind of stuff. So.
But you knew about him to have Spawn as a model at your booth.
Yeah, but I knew Spawn because the guy I worked with, he was one of the producers on the Spawn animated series, so there was that back stuff, you know, yeah.
That makes sense. And so from there, what was the did you pick up any like material to read, to do like any research on, to see like what the characters were like, what color palettes were being used in the current books?
Well, that was the weird part about it, because I mean the computer colors were not called computer colorists back then. Computer colors were separators. We weren't even like we almost didn't get credits. You couldn't sign anything. You know, it's like everything crazy. Back then was done with guides. So you'd be handed a guide, a marker guide. It's like, okay, now do this on the computer on the page, right? And thank God for that, because frankly, I was always a good renderer. I never understood color when I first started there, and we had Joe Chido did all the guides, and Joe's a master painter, also did all the guides for the early Image books, or not all the Image books, but a good chunk of the ones that Steve Oliff didn't do. And so I got to learn a huge amount from him in doing that, but eventually it became a point where, you know, anybody that I brought in then as my guys to staff up, I brought in people who could draw and paint, and then I was just teaching them the computer. So then it became very quickly that we didn't need guides anymore, because we could do it.
You already know how.
Yeah.
So that kind of takes.
So I killed a whole, you know, way of making a living.
It evolved. You know, I think it wasn't even. You know, I think it's just about progress, and I think you were definitely instrumental in taking things from that way and turning into the new way and the way of the future.
Yeah, well, it just seemed silly at a certain point, because it was like the first time they handed me one of the guides, you know, beautiful images. It was like I was looking at, it's like, well, why don't we just scan these? Yeah. Why are we looking at them and recreating them on the computer? It's like, why don't we just scan these? Because they wanted to look back then, and the look was based on what Steve was doing at Oli Optics, which was, because back then you had to spend $10,000 to have a computer that was powerful enough to color a comic book.
Wow.
Right?
That's so expensive, especially back then. I mean,
yeah, that's why there weren't like a whole bunch of people coloring comic books. It was pretty much companies coloring comic books that had staffs of people. And there were two ways to go. One, spend a whole bunch of money on the hardware to do it, or spend a whole bunch of money on the software. And like Steve's unit used the Cod Barrett system, which is basically a vector-based system. So you could run a 286 could color a comic book. 286 is old school PC, right?
Yeah.
Could color a comic book because it's vectors. It's all structure drawings, not bitmaps anymore at that point. And as a result, you get these bands of color, and that's something that became a style and a look, even though it was, you had to do it because it was that program, but we had to try and reproduce that in Photoshop when we didn't have to. And it was also something I always struggled with, as being a guy who's been doing computers forever, back when it was like, okay, we got 16 colors to play with, we got 250 colors, oh, we got 4,096 colors to play with, you know, so it's like, we want smooth colors,
Yeah.
we had to do the banding thing way back when. It's like, this is old school.
We don't want to do this.
But it was the style. So we kind of did a kind of a version of that, I think.
That's cool to really see that it's funny that you see that kind of like style stay around even after the technologies evolved past it, because I feel like the look is still there, and that's that people are used to it and they're familiar with it.
Yeah, the modern, I mean, there's a lot of people who kind of do what my style was at the end of the day, even today.
Yeah.
But it's a designed version of it. It's kind of like the idea was to reproduce old school, like George Petty or Alberto Vargas airbrush stuff.
And so you do something that's really unique in comic books. I think only you and one other person I know do VR in comic books.
Uh-huh.
And how did that come to be?
Well, when we started, so that's a little bit of a longer story. So I was editor in chief for Todd McFarlane. I was penciling inking Spawn. Robert Kirkman and Todd decided that we're going to do Haunt together, right? So we had to staff Haunt. And it was in the middle of the most vicious exclusivity campaign that DC and Marvel had launched against each other. Anybody and everybody who was any good was under contract. I would call people up. I go, hey, so that sounds really cool. And it's like, so when are you available? 5 years from now. It's like, it was just like everybody. And we'd bring in, some people that we'd want to work with and have meetings, and Todd would be in there, and Todd would be like, yeah, but you don't want to be known for doing, Stan and Jack's characters. You want to be known for doing, your own characters and stuff. And Robert, of course, would chime in with the same thing. And I'd be sitting in the back, going, yeah, I used to do my own characters, and it's like, and after enough of those, it's like, it was just, I gotta be going. I gotta be going. So, Marvel made it clear that I could get a nice gig there. And I figured, okay, I'll do the Marvel gig, and then I'll do my creator-owned thing. The Marvel gig will pay for my creator-owned thing, right? And then I was contacted by Skip Brittenham, who's my current partner in Anomaly Productions. And he was like, okay, I want to do this graphic novel. And at first, he's a big entertainment lawyer. And whenever you do have your own publishing company, like, so we had Avalon before that, and also my Haberlin Studios, custom comics are a good way to make a living. So a custom comic is basically like, we did Stan Winston's comics, right, for him. But they paid incredibly well. You don't own them and everything, but it's like, also you got $20,000 for doing that book, and you can finance everything, right? So I was figuring, okay, this probably will end up being something like that. I'll get guys from my studio or whatever, and they'll do the book and stuff. But we hit it off, and we saw eye to eye and everything, and Anomaly, the first one, came out of that, and I'm like, okay, let's do something that no one's done. Let's do huge widescreen, let's do gigantic, let's go big and go home with the thing. And it's like, yeah, let's do it. And he was on the same page, and it's like, I mean, no artist gets to do a landscape comic book hardly at all, So, not to mention a landscape graphic novel, and the first one is the longest original full color graphic novel ever done. So it's like, okay, great. With the AR,
it looks like a movie, though.
Oh, thanks.
It really looks like it's cinematic.
Thanks. I appreciate that. We definitely were going for that sort of approach. We definitely were thinking more like John Ford, epic Western, kind of things when we were even putting it together in the first place. But it was a case of what else can we do that's new? What else can we do that's whatever? And when we first started doing it, AR was coming up, but you needed to have these intrusive QR codes in the middle of a page, and I don't think half people still know how to use a QR code anyway.
Yeah.
And
I wouldn't use QR code just because I had to download the app.
Yeah.
And go through it and get the thing, and then by the time I was like, oh, that was that thing worth it for me to go take an hour to download the app and find that QR code, and so it turned into a whole thing.
Yeah, and so it was like, no, we're not going to do that. And then it became, all of a sudden, they've changed the SDK, now we'll recognize images. We're like, okay. let's go there. You know, that sounds great. And then the idea then was, what really excited me as a creator was the ability for us then to recognize images. Is you go into the app itself tells you which pages are active, and we can add an update to that at any time we want. So like Anomaly 1 started with 20 pages, it now has 65 pages that are augmented. And you look on the app, and they'll have a little new badge by the next update, and you just turn to that page, and boom. So it's the only graphic novels that can grow after publication, which I think is really, for a creator, that's really exciting.
And that's so cool that the content will go, and not only has grown, but it's tripled. It's more than tripled. It's gone from 20 pages to 65 pages.
Yeah.
And that's incredible, especially for someone who buys something and it just can always keep coming back to it, always keep revisiting it.
Yeah.
And really get a chance to, like, you know, say, hey, check out this book, and kind of get the word of mouth out there. Like, look at this new page. Have you seen this process? Yeah. And I think it's so cool because there is side of that process love when you're doing artwork and seeing, you know, anything from script to pencils to inks to colors to letters and adding and see how, like, what phase did this come in? What phase did that come in? And I think that stuff is so cool, and it's part of what makes comics so unique because it really, you get to see the whole process.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think the ability to deep dive is a lot of fun, and I really think that most people who do pick up comics and certain one level kind of want to make comics too. Yeah. So I think that really makes I
want to hold this up and just show some of this beautiful artwork off.
That's Anomaly 2, the Rubicon, that came out at the end of last year.
This is.
And that's being updated bi-monthly with new augmented reality.
So every other month you have a new few pages?
A few handful of pages.
That's great. So people can keep coming back and keep getting new content, so without you even having to buy any.
But again, the thing though that also kind of makes me happy as well is we'll often have, like, because I do most of the retailer conferences as well and stuff, and we'll have retailers that have carried the book and sold the book and reordered the book and whatever, and we have the big screen up with the AR demoing behind us like we do at most shows and stuff, and the retailers will. I didn't know it did that, you know, and they've sold it already and they liked it, and we have people who bought the book and come to get it signed by me. They go, I didn't know the book did that, but they liked it and enjoyed it without that. So it's like, okay, you know,
it works both ways.
That's all good by me, you know.
They have it's really interesting because those shows are amazing from a publisher perspective. Yeah. I've done the Diamond Retailer Summit, Comics Pro. Yeah. They're great with a great chance to get to know the comic book stores because they're. In a lot of ways, they're the gatekeepers for getting people word of mouth out. Yeah. And, you know, if you're really going to have your book on the counter as they're selling, people are going to pick it up because it's right there, and they're the ones who are like, hey, have you heard about Anomaly? Have you heard about this thing? Have you heard about Spawn Witchblade?
Yeah, I mean, they're the curators.
Yeah.
You know, so it's really important.
So what's the, let's back up for a second. How did you go and become the editor-in-chief of McFarlane Productions? What was the process there?
They needed somebody, and I had been working with Todd. We started coloring Spawn issue 45.
Oh wow!
So I already been working with Todd for a very long time.
So this must have been 1996, 1995, 96.
And I had his back when I started because it was things at Top Cow. There was a guy at Top Cow that was I was VP of the creative side, and he was the business guy, and we just butted heads, you know, and stuff. And it became a point where my wife's going to have our first son, and people made it very clearly. I mean, I was top of the pyramid at that point when it came to digital coloring, you know. So everybody was always like, you know, whenever you're free, we've got stuff for you, and back then pay you through the nose for it. And things became uncomfortable enough with that guy that at Top Cow that was like,
I'm gonna walk away.
I gotta go. Sorry, you know. But I left Mark in good hands. I built a great. I mean, you know, Richard Isanov, Steve Verkow. You know, some of the guys were still like the best top colorists in the world.
Yeah, still there.
I was good. You know, it's like here. You know, I never leave any job without like here.
Somebody
you're all set. Over. You know, I can.
Not gonna leave anybody high and dry. And
but anyway, so then that's when. Todd was one of the first clients for the coloring studio, and so that was 95.
And so how did Todd you picked up the phone, or Todd called you and said, hey, we want you to be our editor in chief, or what was it?
It was the president of his company at the time was Larry Martyr, Larry was once image publisher as well before that, and he just thought it'd be a good fit, and it was something I was interested in doing, and I felt there was a lot of like low-hanging fruit, that he had not been, it's like there was a actual real authentic Japanese manga spawn that was done that we never repackaged as trades, and then it was also the idea of you got all these cool toys, and we were going to do how I got actually to pencil and spawn was Brian Holguin and myself were going to do McFarlane Dragons as a comic, and we started working on those pages, and I sent in the pages to Todd to look at, and I got like about 5 pages into it. He's going, yeah, but the guy who's doing this Dragons book, he's pretty good. Maybe he should take over Spawn. Like, that guy's me, Todd. Yeah, okay. And then that's how I started.
That's cool.
Yeah.
And you were on that book for 2 years.
Yeah.
That's amazing. How did you come across that you were part of co-creating Witchblade?
It was really our hubris at the time, where it was like, Lady Death was selling through the roof, and she was selling through the roof and stuff, and we thought, we can do better than that. Yeah. And so we, Dave Wall and I went down to the Santa Monica Pier and had lunch, and we started talking about, okay, whatever it is, she's going to have a regular job and stuff. And we both were into Michael Moorcock stuff, so the Stormbringer, the Soul Gem, the ancient artifact, so the Witchblade is essentially the ancient artifact. And we kind of bare bones it out and stuff. And then I had just worked with Mike on a ballistic miniseries with Wetworks, so we just did 3 issues together. And Mike was just getting better and better and better and better and better and better and better.
Yep.
And Mark chimed in with his 2 cents on things, and that's how that happened.
It was just off to the races.
Yeah, we just decided, let's do it.
That's crazy. And Mike Turner's artwork was incredible as well on that, and he's really a comic book icon in a lot of ways.
He was an incredibly sweet guy too. But the thing too that people, I think artists need to take note of with Mike is Mike approached the art as an athlete would. So Mike was constantly training his art. He was constantly absorbing and researching more art. He was like a sponge. Whenever I would show him any artist he's never seen before, it was just, and then it would affect his art in a positive way, and it kept growing. So any artist out there, they really have to think, how do I get to be a top artist? You work at it.
You sponge and you learn and you watch whoever you can, and any video you can have.
Yeah.
If it's a digital, you can go online, find digital samples of people working and figure out exactly how it is.
Yeah. And we have a big free repository right now, too, with my digital art tutorials.
Oh, yeah. I'm a fan of that. I saw that online as well.
Yeah. So there's all kinds of cool, we pulled some really cool old school stuff. There's scans of some old Gene Colan pencils and John Buscema pencils. So there's things that people could take. And if they want to work on their inks, they can work on their inks. If they want to work on other colors, they work on the colors. We put full PSD files on there, too, so people can take them apart and see how they work and stuff, the layers of color and effects on top of the line art and all that kind of stuff.
And that's so cool for a comic book creator to really have that kind of knowledge and that's kind of school, because there's not a lot of schools out there for comic book artists. Yep. So it's cool to have one that's online that people can access now and go out there and say, okay, this is how you make comics. How do I get better? How do I become that sponge like Michael Turner and keep growing so I can become the next Michael Turner or even better?
Yeah.
And that's the goal.
Yeah.
So for you started doing a few other series. Faster Than Light is another one.
Mm-hmm.
How did that come to be? What was the...
it actually was an idea I had in 1993. I actually I had a partner, Evan Carlos Summers, who was my writing partner, and then he got staffed on Deep Space Nine, and I actually ghost wrote a Deep Space Nine with him. But we were always talking back and forth about doing, we want to do a contemporary Star Trek. Why does it have to be, because you get all these kind of weird, it's like, it's the year 2500, 2300, whatever, and there's still, there's a Beastie Boy soundtrack happening or whatever. It's like, it has to be so affected to have all these things like, no, let's have it happen right now, and then we can have, they come back to Earth that pretty much looks like this.
Yeah.
There may be some weird fancier new watches that people have and stuff like that.
But it's the same world.
The same world, and it's totally relatable because then everything's new to us. It's like you don't have to know what a Klingon Empire is or how warp drive works because you're learning along with our crew because none of us have ever been here and done this before. And the idea that there's no Starfleet to save us, it's one ship, out there on their own, having to. Because I always loved, that was the thing that I always loved about the original series Star Trek is like any problems they got involved in, they got into because of their own actions. Just the opposite of the Next Generation, where they always got in problems because due to their inaction. Number one, what do you think? What do you think? And then we can't, we can't do anything that might frighten them, and then they get, pulled into something. It's like it's just so much more interesting.
Captain Kirk would go in headstrong and say, "Okay, we're going to figure this out. We're going to go in there, punch our way out, and figure it out. Whether it's a mob boss that the whole planet is after, or if they." Or if it's just
I mean, it's just better drama, getting into trouble because you didn't do anything, huh?
Yeah, it's like you got to
really
do something, mess stuff up so you can fix it. You got to break a few omelets to make an omelet.
Yeah. So the idea was basically to do it was I wanted to do my contemporary Star Trek, and again it had been done. 93 is when I had the idea for it, and really it wasn't until I started doing Spawn and stuff that I really had enough chops that I could start doing the whole 9 yards rather than just being the colorist or the writer or the co-creator or whatever that is.
What's the next thing for you? What's the next project? What's the next what's on the horizon for you coming up?
We have a short story that's coming out in the Where We Live book, the charity book that we're doing for the Las Vegas shooting victims. That's coming out beginning of end of this month, I think.
Yeah,
I know I'm doing a couple signings. So I think it's at the in stores at the end of the thing. And then I'm going to Vegas and doing a signing there on the 2nd as well at it's going to kill me, Ralph's store. Well, we can check that. Anyway, and so we have in there. It's a story is basically based on it. It's kind of a 7-pager from one of the new things that David Hine and are going to be doing. It's basically we haven't exactly settled on the title for it yet. Right now, it's either God World or Lost World, but I think it still might be something else. And it's 3 worlds, another time, another place, right, orbiting a gas giant, and 2 rival societies, and then they're both colonizing the 3rd world. And it's really kind of solar sail sort of technology, so they can't like go to any world whenever they want to. It has to be in the right orbit, otherwise you have to wait maybe a year, 2 years before you can even get there again.
That's crazy.
And the 3rd world that they're both trying to colonize right now is the home of all their legends of their gods.
Okay.
And so there are these giant creatures there.
That's cool.
And all kinds of mysteries up to your nose, essentially.
So
we just kind of, and so the 7-pager in the Where We Live book is in that world, and it's one of the young guys. I think like Mobius stuff, riding pterodactyls, flying gliders, giant things, big, huge desert monument kind of thing. And the story is basically, we have this young guy on the thing, and he's got people that he knows that are down the bottom, and one of those giant creatures he sees them, he goes right past him in his glider, and it's going right for them and stuff, and he doesn't have any weapons or anything like that, and he dives back around, risks himself to of course I could just leave and be fine right now, but okay, I'm not. I'm going to risk myself, makes it chase him, gets through a mason, traps it essentially, saves the day, right? But without any weapons. So it was like, it was to honor those people that during the shooting ran into harm's way to help those other people cool. Without
without even a thought for themselves. That's so cool, and that you're honoring them in that way. It's really powerful. I think that's something that's really beautiful about comic books is the way art kind of mimics the real world and those people's actions and showing their bravery.
Yeah, and we're going to push the heck out of it, so hopefully make some money for some people too.
Exactly.
Yeah. But so there's that. There's a adaptation of a Jules Verne book that we'll be doing as well. And there's.
Do you know the Koresh family?
No.
They're friends of mine. They I think they have a lot of. I think they own the licenses to his music, so they're friends of mine.
Oh.
Yeah. I'm not sure if it's Jules Verne or if it's another version, but it was
must be another version.
Another version.
Yeah, I don't think Jules did any music.
Okay. Wrong version there.
Writing, but no music. And then and we have this looks like it may be high-end adult animation coming out.
Oh,
soon.
nice.
Yeah.
That's really exciting.
Yeah.
What's the process like for going from a comic book to taking it to that next level? Because you've done it with Witchblade and now Anomaly. What's the process in getting it optioned and not only getting it optioned, but taking it to production?
Well, that's the harder part. I mean, I've had throughout my career, because, we did, Aria has been optioned multiple times. We had scripts done for the Sci-Fi Channel way back in the day. Hellcop was optioned year after year after year from Gail Ann Hurd's company when she had the German money to do that. And a lot of that stuff's kind of coming back around again. A lot of stuff are being optioned much more. But so, essentially, if you ever, quite often, whoever's going to want to option is just going to come knocking on your door.
Yep.
You can have a manager or an agent as well, and have them be out plugging it as well. But quite often,
it's going to be from
because I mean that's one of the side benefits in doing comics is that most of Hollywood look at comic books.
This is where ideas come from. This is where all the billion-dollar movies are originated here.
So they look at that stuff. But the trick is not getting an option. The trick is getting into production. Yeah. And a lot of times that's completely out of your hands. And sometimes it's one of those places where you step away from it. Like there's been ones that I've had before where it's getting in the option period. It's like, okay, so you guys want to go? You want to go out with it and stuff like that? So we want to go out with it next week. No. Okay, well, tell me what you're going to pitch. And it's like,
we don't have.
I wouldn't make that movie with your money. That's horrible.
Yeah.
And stuff. No. It's like so. I've walked away from several deals that could have been made, but I don't think I would have
been happy with it.
Yeah.
I think that's the most important thing, true to your creative vision and being behind, because what's going to work and what's not. What you have in mind for the project is ultimately, should be that way.
Yeah.
That's why Image was founded.
Yeah, but it's not just that though, really. It's even like something that Skip and I talked about with my partner. It's like, it's always the best idea wins.
Yeah.
And so we're totally open to that sort of thing. Like we just had, I'm not going to get into it because it's a property that I don't have out yet. But the writer for TV pitched switching, all the sexes and the characters, and it was like,
what
in this day and age, and what the story is, it's really makes it very, very timely, and much better. And it was like, okay, great. Okay. Now that wasn't my idea; that was his idea, but that
works for the greater good.
That works, yeah.
Okay.
I'm just against them when they suck.
That's it. Leave what
you gotta make it, because that was also one of the things that was great about. It was very fortunate when I got to start in comics because I got to start at Homage Studios. So Homage was Top Cow, Wildstorm, Will Spertasio and his guys down in San Diego and Mira Mesa. So it was an open floor plan office building. You got to, if you weren't an asshole, walk around, sit behind Scott Williams and watch him ink and have him teach you how to ink. You had Mark Silvestri there, you had Jim Lee, you had the new kids, you had Jeff Campbell who was just starting out, you had Joe Benitez who was there, you had Dave Finch, you had Travis Charis, you had a bunch of other really great up-and-coming inkers and stuff like that. And everybody was out to beat each other, but everyone also was out to improve the product every step of the way. So it was the penciler, the inker's job to make it better than just the pencils, the colorist's job to make it better than just the inks.
Healthy competition.
Which does not exist anymore, really. And there's no place to learn like that. I mean, it was just,
There's no studios like that anymore. No. There's a few studios that exist, but they're not that same sort of thing.
No.
So I have one last question for you.
Yeah.
What advice do you have for any aspiring writers, artists, pencilers, inkers, colorists, letterers? What advice would you have for them to make comic books?
It's the old thing. It's work at the craft. It's like, again, like I said, we said earlier with Mike Turner, and treat it like you're an athlete. If you want to be a writer, treat it like it's a sport and you want to be a professional athlete. Write read, absorb. Like there's these awesome master classes that are out there now. You can, for $25, get David Mamet to teach you, writing techniques and absorb all that stuff, but do it. Whatever it is, whether it's penciling, life drawing, the whole 9 yards, that's weightlifting for penciling, life drawing, but also seeing composition, because it's very different. It's very easy to, I'm going to draw a really pretty picture. Drawing a sequential art page is another ball of wax. And that's another learning curve. I think it's also very frustrating when you have someone who's trained as an illustrator. They think, okay, great, I'm going to do comics, and because when you first think about it, you're like, wait, so I have to do 5 illustrations for 1 page? But then you start thinking about the pages as a whole, and you don't do that until you start. So it's really researching, practice. And do what you need to do to keep the passion alive for it. Because if you're just doing it for a paycheck, do something else.
Yeah, definitely. In comic books, it's not worth the paycheck.
Yeah.
It's go do something that you do it because you love it. I think that's something that's so important with comic books is you have so many people are in comics because they have that passion and that undying love for comics.
Yeah, but then there's so many people that I'll meet going there. So how do I get this in front of a movie studio? It's this crummy, horrible thing that they're not ready to show to anybody. It's like, you got to put in your hours and do 10,000 hours to get excellent at something. Yeah.
So where can people find you online? Where can people keep up with you? Fantastic. Well, thank you for coming on, and
thanks for having me.
Thank you for our awesome crew, for JJ, Raven, Hannah, and Flotron.
Thanks, guys.
And of course, thank you to Varsity Productions for editing.